say, number one point, you need to appoint somebody to manage the border. Although I'm pretty sure that Kamala Harris is our border czar.
So a few things. You have 250,000 people coming in a month illegally. Okay, that is a new Chicago every year. That's a new New York City in the first term of the Biden administration, right? This is an unbelievable amount of people coming into our country. And for Eric Adams to have New York City as a sanctuary city and say that they don't have the resources to house these people, in itself is an unbelievable, ridiculous contradiction, okay? And how he's saying New York City can't handle this many people coming here, then how do they expect the border towns in Texas to be able to handle that?
Yep.
The crime and human trafficking that comes along with it, and the money that this is putting in the cartel's pockets.
Yep.
Okay, from all of this, it is unbelievable. It is a dereliction of duty, not only from Mayorkas, but also President Biden. This is like you are creating a massive humanitarian crisis, a legal crisis that's going to be felt in the U.S. for decades to come.
Well, okay, so let's stay with Kamala Harris. The vice president was in Arizona yesterday, but she didn't go to the border. And then listen to this. A local reporter asked her, says, hey, wait a minute. So, you're here, but, you're not going to the border. Listen to this, guys. Went to El Paso in 2021. That was in June. That was the only time, by the way. And she wasn't even really talking about what was happening in the Rio Grande Valley. She wasn't really addressing it. It was a very brief stop.
Well,
so I'm not sure that counts as I've been to the border.
Seeing the way that she handles these situations, I'm still shocked she left the presidential primary before a single vote was cast. Completely shocked.
Last word, Lee. He's on set with me. He's got a question for you.
Yeah, Senator Lieberman, quick question. What is the end game for Ukraine and Russia situation? What is the goal there? Because to me, it's not clearly defined in any way, shape, or form. And this feels a lot like a lot of the entanglements we've been we've been involved with in the last few decades, as we've seen trillions pour out in Iraq and Afghanistan. And maybe the world's better off. Maybe there's not. In that situation, you have 22 veterans committing suicide every day. So there's a lasting impact of that's really awful. Now it's money-wise. So we're sending another $2.5 billion, but nobody really seems to know what the end goal or end game is. And is it unreasonable to say not another dime until we know what the goal is, what is the metric of success, and how do we account for that going forward?
Well, that's a good and fair question, Mike. And what came into my mind was a famous answer that President Reagan gave at one point in the Cold War when he was asked, how does this end? And he said, it's simple. We win, they lose. That's still a pretty good standard, although it's going to be
going into earnings for the airlines next week. And so, but Scott Kirby, I thought that was a great soundbite. He says, well, some airlines can't play their schedule. Not my airline. I read between the lines on that statement. And United's done pretty well, but a lot of the carriers have not.
Nobody wants a travel nightmare. Okay, it is such a hassle getting to the airport, getting all your stuff there, getting through security, taking your shoes off, making sure you don't lose your laptop or your wallet going through the gates as somebody wands you down or whatever. But for it to be late and to sit there on the runway, I mean, it's just a stressful experience. And I just sleep comfortably knowing that we have a transportation secretary who seems to be on top of everything.
Yeah, he's a real comfort, that Pete Buttigieg. He does such a great job managing the nation's skies.
Good. And if they can't figure it out, then we should say that no one can figure anything out. But the only conclusion I can draw is that they don't want it to be.
That they did. Okay, so they didn't want it to be. Or on the other side, if they were incapable, if we take them at their word that they couldn't figure it out, that means the technology at the Supreme Court is unsafe. That means that they need an overhaul of their computer systems.
Yeah, I'm with Lee on this. I don't think there's any. I think they didn't. They did not want to find who did this because it will expose someone. And Roe versus Wade, for people without religion, is their religion. So the sensitivity to this topic, and if you think about what this led to, it led to an assassination attempt on Justice Kavanaugh, and all the members of the court that voted on this had protesters in front of their house. And Attorney General Merrick Garland can raid Mar-a-Lago, but he cannot protect Supreme Court justices with people coming to their houses. I mean, we've never seen anything like this in the history of the Supreme Court. And everyone used to talk about Donald Trump breaking norms. This is the norm to be broken. Now, if a Supreme Court justice wants to rule in a way the left doesn't like, they need to fear for their life. They know no one is coming to save them, and there will be no repercussion for someone who puts their life in danger. The seriousness of them not finding out who did this and punishing them to the fullest extent of the law is going to have ramifications that we can't imagine.
Because someone's going to think that I can get away with this the next go round. And who's not to say, and I know this is going to sound a little conspiracy theory, who's not to say that, because a lot of sensitive business corporate cases come to the Supreme Court, things with regards to you. We've got this breaking news this morning. We've been talking about it. Google parent company Alphabet reportedly cutting about 12,000 jobs. That's about 6% of the global workforce. Of course, the stock is higher because a lot of times Wall Street likes to see layoffs, but they're not the first company. We've seen tech across the board. This week, we've heard from Microsoft. We've also heard from Goldman Sachs and other banks, Tesla, Amazon. The list goes on and on. Coinbase, BuzzFeed, BlackRock. This is pretty rough here.
Yeah, just to follow up on what we were just talking about with the Fed, this is what the Fed wants. You need to crush the economy, to crush inflation.
So the Fed wants layoffs is what you're saying?
Unfortunately, yes. We are in the middle of a wage price spiral. And so in this wage price spiral, as the cost of good goes up, you need to pay your workers more. As you pay your workers more, you then need to raise the price of your cost of goods. So as these things going up continue to go, there's only two ways to fight inflation, is to create more supply or to crush demand. And the Fed is going to crush demand. It's working. And now that you are seeing layoffs from some of the most profitable companies in the history of the world, companies with hundreds of billions of dollars of cash on their balance sheets are laying off workers. What does that say about how they think the economy is going forward and what they need to do to preserve their margin? So on one hand, this is bad news for those losing their job. On the other hand, it's probably good news because it means the end of this inflationary cycle is hopefully near.
And then maybe they can start to rehire at some point. And Mike, I want to pick up on Netflix because they did report last night and they missed on earnings, but they added millions of subscribers. So that kind of a piece of good news in this morass of negativity out there.
Yeah, you know, these streaming wars, if you go back a few years, you're like, how can Netflix win this? When you're competing with the likes of Amazon, Disney, Warner Media, all these big wigs in terms of content and this content arms race, will Netflix not only be able to keep their subscribers, but keep putting out good content? Well, we have the answer in that everybody else is trimming down their subscriptions. When maybe during the pandemic, they had 8 or 5, and now they're going to 2 or 3. Netflix was the first mover. They are still the leader in the market. And this blowout of subscribers in terms of relative to expectations was pretty shocking. The stock's up dramatically because of it. I do not know what this management change and leadership change is going to mean for the company going forward, but Netflix is here to stay. And while it seems like in the streaming world, you look at a Disney Plus and what that's done to Disney stock, it seems like as the rest of the world is kind of falling apart around it, Netflix is looking pretty good and it's hanging in there. I'm a little bit shocked, but also you're starting to see the power of being this first mover and continuing to put new stuff out there.
I think a lot of people were, and I'm glad you brought that up, Mike, about Disney, because it's the opposite at Disney, and that's why Bob Iger has been brought back in to fix things because of the streaming mess at Disney Plus. Right, I think the White House, what they're trying to do here is, look at all the small businesses being created after a pandemic, after the country was locked down.
You know, this is, it's like today's version of up is down, left is right, black is white from this White House. The Small Business Optimum Index is lower now than it was in March of 2020 during the height of COVID.
Wow.
It is an unmitigated disaster. How bad it is for small business. And the Biden team, they're on the payroll, big tech, big labor, big banks, all the things that crush small business, the inflationary policies of this administration. I wouldn't go as far to say that they're the enemy of small business, but it is very, very far back at the end of their agenda. This is not an entrepreneurial administration. This is an administration of the biggest business, the administrative state, and anything they can do to keep the poor and to keep people from breaking out, from being under government control.
Yeah.
The bacon cheeseburger ordering is just one of those things I can't get past. Well, the truth is, I mean, small business